Shalom, y'all. This is your brother back again with another video. And today's video, we're going to go over the book, the itinerary of Benjamin of Tudela. This is a nationally archived book. Here's your ISBN number in case those of you who may be interested want to purchase this book. The itinerary of Benjamin of Tudela. It's written by a Jew from the 1st century who did a lot of traveling in Europe and the Holy Land, and he wrote down, what he found in his travels. Okay, we're gonna jump right into this because many people will challenge, well, where are the remains of the biblical characters of the Bible? Seeing how they can see things like the pyramid, which are from before the flood, from before, Shem. All right. So let's get into this. So we'll start on page 30, and I'm recording at this angle because I'm going to tie in a video, and I want this all to flow well. But just so you know, this is the whole book. I'm just zooming up on it. Okay, so this part right here, it says there are about 200 Jews who dwell under the tower of David in one corner of the city, the lower portion of the wall, the Tower of David, to the extent about 10 cubits, is part of the ancient foundation set up by our ancestors. The remaining portion had been built by the Mohammedans. You'll see that in the video. Some of it they're going to say is part of the, the Byzantinum, or whatever. You'll see. There is no structure in the whole city stronger than the Tower of David. The city also contains two buildings, from one of which the hospital there issue forth 400 nights. And therein all the sick who come thither are lodged and cared for in life and in death. The other building is called the Temple of Solomon. It is the place built by Solomon, king of Israel. 300 nights are quartered there and issue forth every day for military exercises. Besides those who come from the land of the Franks and the other parts of Christendom, having taken upon themselves to serve there a year or two until their vow is finished. In Jerusalem is the great church called the Sepulchre, and here is the burial place of Jesus, whom the Christians make pilgrimages. So the Christendom is another, they're referring to them as Franks right there, which is another name for the so-called white man. Okay? They're called Franks, and it's saying other parts of Christendom. So you're seeing knights are there. You're seeing knights are there, which we know who had the knights, Okay. So, do I want to read all of that? We're just going to jump over here to page 31. Okay. We're going to start up here. Okay. In front of Jerusalem is Mount Zion, on which there is no building except a place of worship belonging to the Christians. Facing Jerusalem for a distance of 3 miles are the cemeteries belonging to the Israelites, who in the days of old buried their dead in caves, and upon each sepulchre is a dated inscription. But the Christians destroy the sepulchres, employing the stones thereof and building their own houses. These sepulchres reach as far as Zelah, in the territories of Benjamin. Around Jerusalem are high mountains. Now, there's a scripture that reads about people who desecrate graves. This is the desecration of graves, moving people's ancient landmarkers. So the Christians are the reason why we don't know where the remains of the Israelites today. But they do exist. They did definitely exist. But the Christians, church folk, destroyed those locations. All right. We're going to jump over to page 32. Okay. Let's go back. Page 31. Let's continue reading because it's going to tie right in. On Mount Zion, there are sepulchres of the house of David and the sepulchres of the kings that ruled after him. The exact place cannot be identified, inasmuch as 15 years ago a wall of the church of Mount Zion fell in. The patriarch commanded the overseer to take stones of the old walls and restore therewith the church. He did so, and hired workmen at fixed wages, and there were 20 men who brought the stones from the base of the wall of Zion. Among these men there were 2 who were sworn friends. On a certain day one entered the other. On a certain day one entertained the other. After their meal they returned to their work, where the overseer said to them, "Why have you tarried today?" They answered, "Why need you complain? When our fellow workmen go to their meal, we will do our work." When the dinner time arrived, and the other workmen had gone to their meal, they examined the stones and raised a certain stone which formed the entrance to a cave. Thereupon one said to the other, "Let us go in and see if any money is to be found there." They entered the cave and reached a large chamber resting upon pillars of marble overlaid with silver and gold. In front was a table of gold and a scepter and crown. This was the sepulchre of King David. On the left thereof, in like fashion, was the sepulchre of King Solomon. Then followed the sepulchre of all the kings of Judah that were buried there. Closed coffers were also there, the contents of which no man knows. These 2 men essayed to enter the chamber, when a fierce wind came forth from the entrance of the cave and smote them, and they fell to the ground like dead men, and there they lay until evening. And there came forth a wind like a man's voice, crying out, "Arise, and go forth from this place." So the men rushed forth in terror, and they came unto the patriarch, and related these things to him. Thereupon the patriarch sent forth Rabbi Abraham el-Constantini, the prior recluse, who was one of the mourners of Jerusalem. I'm going to jump down. It says, "These are the sepulchres of the house of David. They belong to the kings of Judah." It says, "On the morrow, let us enter and you see these men and find out what is there." And on the morrow, they sent for 2 men and found each of them lying in his bed in terror. And the men said, "We will not enter there, for the Lord doth not desire to show it to any man." Then the patriarch gave orders that the place should be closed up and hidden from sight of man unto this day. "These things were told me," they said, "Rabbi Abraham." Okay, so we're going to jump over here to page 33. Okay. It's going to say, it says, here we go. At a distance of 6 parasangs is Saint Debron, which is Hebron, the old city on the mountain, but it is now in ruins, and in the valley by the field of Machpelah lies the present city. Here is the great church called Saint Abram, and this is a Jewish place of worship at the time of Mohammedan rule. But the Gentiles have erected there 6 tombs, respectively, called those of Abraham and Sarah, Isaac and Rebekah, Jacob and Leah. It says the Gentiles have erected there 6 tombs. Okay? The custodians tell the pilgrims that there are tombs of the patriarchs. These are the tombs of the patriarchs, for which information the pilgrims give them money. If a Jew comes, however, and gives a special reward, the custodian of the cave opened unto him a gate of iron, which was constructed by our forefathers. Then he is able to descend below by means of steps, holding a lighted candle in his hand. He then reaches a cave in which nothing is to be found, and a cave beyond, which is likewise empty. But when he reaches the third cave, behold, there are 6 sepulchres, those of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, respectively, facing those of Sarah, Rebekah, and Leah. And upon the graves are inscriptions cut in stone. Upon the grave of Abraham is engraved, "This is the grave of Abraham." Upon that of Isaac, "This is the grave of Isaac, the son of Abraham our father." And upon Jacob, "This is the grave of Jacob, the son of Isaac, and the son of Abraham our father." And upon the others, "This is the grave of Sarah, this is the grave of Rebekah, and this is the grave of Leah." A lamp burns day and night upon the graves in the cave. One finds there many casks filled with the bones of Israelites, and the members of the house of Israel were wont to bring the bones of their father thither to deposit them there to this day. Beyond the field of Machpelah is the house of Abraham, where it is in front of that house, but out of reverence for the patriarch Abraham, no one is allowed to build in the neighborhood. So we see that the remains of our ancestors in a place called the Tombs of the Patriarch. Now turn your attention to this video. Shalom.
All right, guys, we're inside the building right now. And as I stated before, the internet here is terrible. So I pre-recorded this, but this is as live as it can get. As I recorded this video about an hour and a half before our live tour. Now, you noticed as we came inside that we went up a lot of stairs. So we're above ground right now. And Jews, we bury our dead 6 feet under. We bury our dead in the ground. And that's because ash to ash, dust to dust. We want to return our body, which was made from the earthly elements, our soul being godly material, goes to Shemaim, goes to heaven, goes up above. But our bodies, earthly material, we want to put it back in the ground where it came from. So the burial plots over here cannot be exactly where our ancestors, our forefathers and foremothers are buried. But what we do have is the grave marker, in English known as a cenotaph, or in Hebrew, it's Tzion, right? It's Tzion, Avraham Avinu, the Tzion, the grave marker, the cenotaph of Abraham, our forefather. And it's literally just inside this room right here. You can see it a little bit over here. And interestingly enough, you can see that there's a bulletproof mirror over there. And I can see inside over there, there are literally Muslims on the other side who are also praying here to be close to Abraham. Also, their forefathers, especially now being the month-long holiday of Ramadan, a month-long holiday of Ramadan for the Arabs. So this is a very busy time for the Arabs to be praying here as well. And throughout the entire building here, we have the cenotaphs of these 6 grave markers of our forefathers and foremothers. We have Avraham, who's over here. And we have his wife, Sarah, who's buried over here. You can see the grave marker here, the Tzion, Sarah Amenu, right? The grave marker, the cenotaph of Sarah, our foremother. But interestingly, is in this room, you can see there's Arabic inscription, okay? And we mentioned earlier that Hebron was conquered by many, many different peoples. It's one of the reasons why the building itself, its structure built by King Herod, lasted for so long, is unlike in Jerusalem where it was destroyed. Here the people just wanted to take it over. Now you can see this interesting architecture over here, this red, white architecture over here. Now this was built by the Mamluks, as we talked about, in the 13th century, roughly about 700 years ago. And they had this very, very particular way of building. And you can see this in the Old City in Jerusalem and different parts around Israel, of using this red stone, white stone, red stone, white stone, and obviously a very, very beautiful style of architecture, and lasting a very long time, still around right now. And who were these people? These people were known as the Mamluks who built this structure over here, this red light. And the Mamluks, very interesting people. Believe it or not, they were actually kidnapped What do I mean kidnapped? During the second jihad, the great jihad where the Arab nations coming out of the Middle East conquered much of Europe, they actually stole, they snatched, they kidnapped, they stole young children, the age of 3, 4 years old from their families, brought them back to Cairo, which was the head, it was the center of the Arab people at that time, and trained them to be like samurai, to be these ultimate warriors in order to protect the Sultan, in order to protect the throne of Egypt at that time. Well, when the emperor, when the Sultan died, they realized that they were the ones with the guns, and you had a military coup. Okay, there was no guns back then, but they were the ones with the weapons and the know-how of how to use them. Nobody could defeat them. They took over these white Europeans who were Muslims. They were trained as Muslims. They believed in Muslim ideology, and they believed in one God, but they were born as Christians in Europe, and they were snatched and kidnapped and trained as warriors. And in fact, they were some of the best swordsmen and cavalrymen in the history of mankind. Everybody knows Genghis Khan. Genghis Khan, who, the Mongols, who almost conquered the entire known world, they were defeated by the Mamluks here in Israel, just outside of Tiberias. And they're the ones that are going to build this whole section on top of the building. They're going to put a whole nother section on top of the old section, right? You have the old section underneath me right here. And then underneath this, you'll have also rooms, and underneath that is where the cave is located, where the tomb of the patriarchs and the matriarchs are. But they build these pillars that you can see over here, and the entrance, and the halls in which the cenotaph, again, it's just the cenotaph, the grave markers of our ancestors and our forefathers and our foremothers are located. And just like we had the mezuzah, when we came in here, every door has a mezuzah, and this one's really beautiful. It does say Gan Eden, and it says Yaakov and Leah, because this is the hall where Yaakov and Leah are buried. And so you can see over here, again, just like we saw in the other hall, Tzion, Yaakov, Amena, right? The Tzion, the grave marker, the cenotaph of our forefather Yaakov, who was also known as Israel. He was also given a second name, Israel. So we can see the importance of this place. It's not just our forefathers. Even the name Israel, was the name Israel come from, is also buried right here. And this is why Israel goes to great lengths in order to protect this area. And it's so important to us of who we are, because obviously this is the patriarchs and the matriarchs who are buried here, but also where the name Israel comes from is buried right here. Yaakov is also known as Yisrael. And then just like with Abraham, and just like with Sarah, the twin cenotaphs, here you have the Tzion of Leah Amenu, right? Of Leah, our foremother. Now, Yaakov, Israel, had two wives, right? He had Leah, and there was also Rachel. And Rachel died in childbirth and was buried between Bethlehem, and Yerushalayim, Jerusalem. And her grave's still there and is visited by hundreds of thousands of people every single year, just like the tombs over here are buried. Now, if you're counting, you know that we've only visited 4 cenotaphs, but there should be 6 grave markers. The other 2 being, the middle generation of you, the child of Abraham, Akedah Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac. And Isaac and his wife Rivka, Rebecca, are buried on the other side here. Now, it's closed to us, and these are bulletproof windows over here. It's closed to us all but 10 days out of the year. And those 10 days is during the Chol HaMoed period, the in-between days of Pesach and Sukkot, as well as Chayei Sarah for that Shabbat, the Parsha that talks about the actual burial of Sarah. But we can see a picture over here. This is what they look at, and I can actually hear the Arabs and the Muslims on the other side praying right now. I can hear them on the other side of this door. And from here, there's a very famous opening and a shaft. You can see this girl being dropped down through this. Roughly, I think it was probably almost 40 years ago maybe, it was dropped down in here, and some pictures were taken, and you can actually see the cave and some of the ancient pottery and the materials. And you can see here's a diagram of it, of where the actual tomb of the patriarchs and the matriarchs were actually located. And of course, as we mentioned before too, underneath that, the double cave, it's a double cave. You have the one cave of patriarchs and the matriarchs, but underneath that, and according to Jewish tradition, is where Abraham is where Adam and Eve, right? First man and woman. What was the first man and woman, right? The first breath of godliness into our earthly bodies was given. Not to say that there weren't animals, literally, who looked like us, like Homo sapiens, but they didn't have that soul. They didn't have that godly soul. They didn't have that part of Hashem, of God with them inside. And so Adam and Eve were the first ones to be given that. And so this is the inside of the tomb of the patriarchs and the matriarchs. It's really unbelievable. But let's head out right now and we'll wrap up the tour. It's been a pleasure bringing you guys in here. Let's go.